Part 58. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 571. Although wrong, you ordered not to give Siejin painkillers. The herbs Chu Nanyi used to apply the medicine to him contained some analgesic and hypnotic ingredients, but the amount was not much, so Siejin could only sleep for an hour. An hour later, Siejin was awakened by the pain. After waking up, he was naturally covered in cold sweat. With his forehead against the pillow on the couch, he pursed his lips to endure the pain on his body. Siejin wanted to take a shower urgently. From last night to now, sweat had seeped out layer by layer, and his body was sticky and uncomfortable, but at the moment, taking a shower was obviously a luxury for him. Xian Yuanyao entered the palace at this time. The little leopard who had not slept all night saw Chu Nanyi riding a horse to the military camp before dawn, and his pupils shrank slightly. At that moment, no one knew that his legs were soft. After listening to Chu Nanyi's order calmly, he nodded, "Wait for me for a moment." Turning around to the barracks to wash and change clothes, and telling several generals under his command not to delay the training, Xian Yuanyao took a deep breath, and left the barracks with Chu Nanyi and rode towards the city. After listening to Chu Nanyi's words on the road, Xian Yuanyao frowned. He was injured, why didn't he go back to rest? You know Siejin's temper, Chu Nanyi said calmly. He doesn't want to go back, who can persuade him? Xian Yuanyao said nothing more and rode straight to the palace. For Xian Yuanyao, Chu Nanyi didn't need to remind him much. He knew Rong Yu's temper very well. He didn't need others to teach him what to do and what to say when he entered the palace. Arriving at the palace, the sky was completely bright, and it was another sunny day. He walked straight to the imperial study without stopping for a moment. When he opened the door and saw someone lying on the couch, Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly. His eyes fell on the broken rattan sticks on the ground that no one had picked up yet, and he pursed his lips and quietly closed the door. Siejin looked up when he heard the noise, and was slightly stunned when he saw Xian Yuanyao. Then he smiled, "Yao Yao." Xian Yuanyao hummed, walked over and stretched out his hand to lift the blanket covering him, and glanced at the injuries all over his body, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, nothing serious. He was worried all night, and only at this moment did he feel relieved. Siejin's expression was just like this. "Why don't you go back and rest?" Xian Yuanyao covered him with a blanket and frowned at Siejin. "I heard from Chu Nanyi that the master only gave you 3 days to rest. If you don't go back and take good care of yourself, your injuries will heal slowly. Will you be able to get up by then?" Siejin stretched out his hand and held Xian Yuanyao's hand hesitantly. Seeing that he didn't refuse, he was slightly happy. "I'm worried about you." "What's there to worry about?" Xian Yuanyao's eyes fell on his broken nails, and his brows frowned more tightly. "Did you have a hard time last night?" "Not bad." Siejin didn't want to lose face in front of him, and his tone revealed a bit of indifference. "Whether it was hard or not, I got through it." Xian Yuanyao thought that Siejin was a powerful and noble son after all. He had been spoiled since childhood and had never been punished like this. He was probably a little uncomfortable. Xian Yuanyao raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead, and said lightly, "Now that you have entered the court, you can't do whatever you want with the master. Don't be stupid again." Siejin's expression became more and more subtle. Hearing this, he actually felt that the little leopard was treating him as a child and was giving him advice. He, the 9th master of the Xie family, who was often called a fox, was beaten last night. Could it be that he really became a weak young man who needed to be cared for? However, Siejin thought about it and realized that what he did was indeed not what a normal smart person should do, or in other words, he thought he was smart but fell, and unfortunately fell into the hands of the master. He will definitely not make such a mistake again in the future. But this is not the point. The point is that he obviously wanted to protect the little leopard, So why did the little leopard start to lecture him as soon as he entered the palace? It seemed that he was treating him as an ignorant child. How do you feel now? Xian Yuanyao turned his head and looked at the sky. Do you want to eat something? Drink water? Do you want to get up and wash up? Xiejin nodded. Let someone get me some water. I want to wash up. Xian Yuanyao hummed, and told the palace servants waiting outside to bring the light food from the imperial kitchen, preferably liquid food, and prepare some warm water. Then he took care of Xiejin himself for half an hour, took him to the toilet, washed his face and hands, and wiped all the places on his body that could be wiped with water. Although it was painful and sweaty during the process, it finally cleaned up a little. After Xiejin ate a bowl of porridge, Chu Nanyi came to change his medicine according to the time. Xian Yuanyao picked up the broken vines on the ground and said to Chu Nanyi, please send him back to rest. Keep him in Jinyuan for the next 3 days. Don't bother him anymore. Xiejin frowned slightly. Yao Yao, I didn't say I wanted to go back. Chu Nanyi ignored them, packed up the medicine box, turned around and walked out. Xian Yuanyao was puzzled. The master has punished you, why are you still staying here? Isn't it better to go back to Jinyuan to rest? It's better to have servants and maids serving you than staying here. Xiejin pursed his lips. I'm worried about you. What can I do if I'm worried? Xian Yuanyao frowned even more tightly. The master just wants to ask me about the military camp. Are you afraid that the master will kill me? Xiejin said calmly, did those days delay your progress? A little bit. Xian Yuanyao told the truth, but it's not your fault. I violated military discipline by leaving the military camp without permission. It has nothing to do with you. After a pause, besides, even if the master wants to punish me, you can't plead for me. What are you doing here? Xiejin felt a little sour in his heart. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Xian Yuanyao's expression straighten and emphasized seriously, I remind you, if you don't want me to be abolished by the master today, you'd better shut up later. Xiejin was silent. Don't be so unruly, Xian Yuanyao said in a light tone, I originally thought that the master would use the court stick on you when he was angry. I was worried all night last night. Now that I see that you are not seriously injured, I am relieved. Go back and rest first, get well soon and go to the palace to work, and don't challenge the master's temper again. Xiejin felt warm in his heart when he heard that he was worried all night, but he found that Xian Yuanyao today was really different from the past. He was so serious that he was a little uncomfortable. Maybe this is the real Xian Yuanyao. The little leopard raised in the ironclad military camp does not allow any ambiguity when it comes to the rules. The shadow of the master can be vaguely seen on him. Xiejin was silent for a moment, and lay on the pillow somewhat powerlessly. You can pretend that I don't exist, and I will pretend that I don't exist. No, Xian Yuanyao said firmly, you must go back. Xiejin frowned, why? Xian Yuanyao frowned, don't I want to save face? The originally serious atmosphere was instantly broken by the sentence. Xiejin's expression paused, and then his phoenix eyes slightly curved, Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao stared at him angrily. Didn't I let you see it too? Xiejin sighed, took his hand and put it on his lips and kissed it, we are also brothers in distress. What are you doing? Xian Yuanyao was startled by his kiss, and subconsciously pulled back his hand, but he used too much force and accidentally brought Xiejin down from the couch. Bang! Xiejin's face was pale, and his eyes were black in pain, and cold sweat was pouring out like soybeans. Xian Yuanyao was startled, and was about to bend down to help him, but he heard the sound of the door opening, and subconsciously turned his head. Rong Yu, dressed in a black royal robe, stood in front of the door, looking at the scene in front of him with an expressionless face. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 572. The air seemed to freeze for an instant. Xian Yuanyao's face changed slightly, and he didn't have time to wait for Xie Jin to slow down. He picked him up very quickly and put him on the couch, regardless of how Xie Jin felt now. After turning around and walking a few steps forward, Xian Yuanyao lifted his robe and knelt down. "Your Majesty." "Very busy." Rong Yu's eyes were cold. "Do you need me to give you a little more time?" Xian Yuanyao lowered his eyes. "I know my mistake, please punish me." Xie Jin lay down on the couch obediently. Even though he was so nervous that his heart almost jumped out of his chest, he kept the little leopard's words in mind. He bowed his head and admitted his mistake and remained silent. He must not earn him more punishment. Rong Yu walked in. "I heard that you have been slacking off a lot recently." Xie Jin's heart tightened. "I know I was wrong." Xian Yuanyao's face turned slightly pale, but he did not dare to defend himself at all. "Please take responsibility, my lord. Take off your robe and stand on your head against the wall." "Yes." Xian Yuanyao neatly took off his outer robe, walked to the wall, put his hands on the ground, turned his body vigorously, and stood up steadily. Although he was leaning against the wall, his body did not dare to use the wall's strength at all. He was only supported steadily by his hands and stood upright. Rong Yu took out a cane from the bucket, wiped away the water stains, walked behind him, raised his hand and struck the cane. Snap! Pain spread across his buttocks. Xian Yuanyao adjusted his breathing, but his body still stood firmly in a straight line without even the slightest tremor. Xie Jin's scalp went numb when he heard the sound, and he bit his pillow unconsciously, fearing that he would accidentally make a sound. Xian Yuanyao didn't react at all and let the cane fall on his buttocks and legs. Rong Yu was beaten more than 20 times. Yes, just about 20 times, and then threw the cane back into the bucket. "Come down." Xian Yuanyao was surprised. He turned over neatly and knelt firmly on the ground again, as if the cane was just tickling him. "Of course it hurts." Rong Yu never said anything about letting go when he took action. But this pain was nothing to Xian Yuanyao. Except for a slight sweat on his forehead, his breathing rate did not even change. Carefully raising his eyes to look at Rong Yu, Xian Yuanyao said respectfully, "I neglected my duties and left the military camp without authorization. I violated military discipline. I hope that the Lord will take heavy responsibility." Rong Yu said calmly, "This barrel of rattan is prepared for you. Do you think you can escape?" Xian Yuanyao lowered his head. "Yes. I'm tired, I owe you the punishment you deserve." Rong Yu sat in the chair, raised his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. "Next time if you do it again, you can try to see whether the torture instrument is more powerful, or whether your bones are harder some." Xie Jin's mind suddenly relaxed and he slowly let go of the pillow he was biting, feeling a little surprised and a little surprised. "My bones are definitely not as powerful as the instruments of torture," Xian Yuanyao said in a good tone. "I will never do it again in the future. Thank you, Lord, for your forgiveness." Then I thought that Rong Yu came back with His Majesty yesterday. He first discussed matters with the ministers, then cleaned up Xie Jin overnight, and went to court early in the morning to discuss matters. He hadn't had much rest yet, and he couldn't help but feel guilty again. "I want to say something, but I feel like everything is superfluous. From now on, the meeting place will be moved to the Kinzen Hall, and this royal study is reserved for you too." Rong Yu said in a calm voice, "The cane can be soaked at any time. If you are itchy, feel free to challenge me. I don't mind loosening it for you every now and then. Loosen the muscles and bones." Xian Yuanyao's scalp felt numb. "I don't dare. This treatment is so good that it is too good for people to tolerate." Xie Jin broke 2 canes for his first offense, and he just heard that there were originally 5 canes. The master was merciful and only punished half, otherwise Xie Jin would really need to be carried back to Xie's house now. Based on Xian Yuanyao's understanding of Rong Yu, it was really not easy for the head of his family to pay this debt. It was a knife hanging above his head. If he dared to do it again next time, he would definitely not be so easy to talk to. If you offend again, the penalty will be doubled, and you will have to double what you owe, and there will be no chance of forgiveness midway. Just thinking about this number is terrifying. Xian Yuanyao decided to break up with Xiejin and tell him to behave better in the future and not be so stupid. Rong Yu never liked verbal threats. The purpose of warning was achieved, and he asked Xian Yuanyao about the progress of his military training. It was as he expected. As for staying up all night because of worry last night, Rong Yu didn't blame him too much and just said, "Send Xiejin back to rest." Yes, Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips and hesitated for a moment. "Chen, can you stay and take care of him for a day? Ajin is thin-skinned." "Don't make mistakes if you are thin-skinned," Rong Yu said in a cold voice. "Now you know how embarrassing it is." Xiejin didn't dare to speak. Xian Yuanyao secretly thought, didn't the Lord also do it himself in order to protect Ajin's pride? The treatment for the injury was sent to Chu Nanyi, who was not named. If the imperial doctor had been allowed to treat the injury, the news of the punishment of the legitimate son of the Xie family would have spread to countless people, and speculations would abound, including those who were joking and others who speculated that Xiejin had fallen out of favor. In short, there are only a few people outside who are looking forward to good things for Xiejin, and those who add insult to injury are probably the majority. But he could think about it in his mind, but he still didn't dare to say it directly. "I'll give each of you 3 days off." Rong Yu finally relaxed. "Just stay at home to recuperate, and don't worry about outside matters. If you really can't take any time off, you'll be on duty in the palace tomorrow." "Things outside?" Xian Yuanyao was confused, but he didn't say anything. He just lowered his head and said, "Thank you, Lord." Xiejin was injured and would definitely not be able to ride a horse, so he could only ride in a carriage. Not long after Rong Yu left, Chu Nanyi knocked on the door and came in, bringing Xiejin a set of clean clothes. Xiejin lay on the couch. "You go to Yao Yao to check his injuries first." Xian Yuanyao frowned. "I'm fine, no need to check." "I think Prince Yao should be fine," Chu Nanyi said in a gentle tone. "He can walk and jump, and looks free to move." "What's so good about it?" Xiejin was silent for a moment, and didn't know what he thought of. For the first time in his life, he didn't insist. Xian Yuanyao, a dignified military commander, had to do the work of a servant. He and Chu Nanyi helped Xiejin put on his clothes and helped him down. "Can you walk?" Xiejin stood quietly for a moment and found that the pain was completely gone, but he was not a squeamish young man who couldn't bear any hardship. He bit his teeth gently and nodded slowly. "It's okay, you can walk." But in fact, it was very hard to walk. Every step pulled the wound behind him, causing dizzy pain. Fortunately, the carriage was parked in the open space not far from the imperial study. Chu Nanyi and Xian Yuanyao were watching him from left and right. Xiejin finally walked to the carriage alone. Except for his pale face, his walking posture was normal. After staying in the imperial study for a day and a night, Xiejin was isolated from the world and knew nothing about what was happening outside. When Xian Yuanyao entered the palace in the morning, it was still calm outside. It was not until they left the palace that they knew what Rong Yu meant by asking them not to care about what was happening outside. The Prince of Wei's mansion was raided. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 573. The imperial army surrounded the Prince of Wei's mansion and found the jade seal from the Prince of Wei's study. The crime of conspiracy was confirmed. The couple, Fang Lanyi, and everyone in the mansion were all arrested. Xiejin, who was lying in the carriage, felt so relieved when he heard the news, and suddenly felt that the injuries on his body were no longer so painful. "You deserve it," he snorted coldly. with a bit of teeth grinding, "Finally, I don't have to see this disgusting family anymore." Xian Yuanyao knelt down on the soft carpet of the carriage and said, "Ajin, when do you think Commander Yang was bribed by King Wei?" Xiejin was silent for a moment. "This was an oversight on my part. It seems that the Lord should have more information than me. He dismissed Commander Yang without waiting for me to give a detailed report." Xian Yuanyao looked at him for a while and then suddenly changed the topic. "My lord led troops to guard the border when he was a boy. During the years of war with northern Xinjiang and the Shu kingdom, his soldiers were almost unbroken. In the year when the northern Xinjiang cavalry was defeated, he cut off the head of the top general in northern Xinjiang, killed tens of thousands of elites in northern Xinjiang, and greatly damaged the vitality of northern Xinjiang. That battle was particularly tragic for northern Xinjiang, but the Suanjia army under the command of the Lord suffered a total loss. There were less than 500 people." Xiejin was startled, not expecting Xian Yuanyao to suddenly talk about this, and was silent for a moment. "The soldiers and horses trained by the Lord are like well-trained wolves on the grassland. They are ferocious, sturdy, not afraid of death, and are exceptionally united. Anyone in the Suanjia army can trust his fellow soldiers with their backs. Don't worry about betrayal," Xian Yuanyao said with a hint of yearning. "It's a feeling that a civil servant like you probably doesn't understand. It makes people excited and willing to follow him wholeheartedly." Xiejin looked strange. "Yao Yao, please speak up. What does a civil servant like you probably won't understand? Do you look down on him?" Xian Yuanyao coughed lightly. "What I want to tell you is that the Lord may seem ruthless, but he is particularly caring for his soldiers. In his concept, any unnecessary death can be avoided in advance. The biggest mistake was not the loss of the Jade Seal, but the 5 human lives. We ignored the key from the beginning. Military training is rigorous in order to reduce casualties on the battlefield." Xiejin sighed. "I know. It's a pity that even if he knew it in advance, he wouldn't take it seriously. In the past, the 9th master of the Xie family never cared about other people's life or death. Wrong, you used an unforgettable lesson to make him remember that human life cannot be taken lightly. You still need some time to adapt to the transition from a noble son to a 5th-grade official, but you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself." Xian Yuanyao comforted him warmly. "As long as you don't do anything that crosses the bottom line, my lord will not take it seriously. You are bound by the rules of the palace." Xiejin's expression became more subtle. "Yao Yao, I am not a 3-year-old child." His own mother had never taught him so carefully. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment, then snorted coldly. "If it weren't for the fact that you were beaten so badly, do you think I want to say such nonsense? Isn't he afraid that he will make a fool of himself again in the future? I know Yao Yao loves me." Xiejin's lips curled up slightly. "It's worth the beating." Xian Yuanyao was annoyed when he heard this and was about to say something, but the carriage stopped at this moment. "The Xie family has arrived." Chu Nanyi, who was sitting in front of the car, got out of the car first, and then opened the curtain for the two of them. "Should you two get off the car first and go back to Jinyuan to rest, or should you continue to stay in the car and flirt?" Xian Yuanyao walked out of the carriage and said in a calm tone, "Master Chu has always been as calm and elegant as a gentleman. Don't ruin your image." "Gentleman." Chu Nanyi smiled noncommittally and reached out to help the crippled and sick man out of the car. The young man from the Xie family came out, and after greeting him, he quickly drove the carriage out. When the servants saw the 9th young master coming back, they all saluted to greet him. The 9th young master stayed in the palace last night to discuss government affairs with the regent. He accidentally encountered an assassin and was loyal to protect the lord. He was injured by the assassin. The regent granted him a 3-day rest." Xian Yuanyao said in a calm tone. "Please be tight-lipped. If anyone spreads the news that 9th young master is injured." Chu Nanyi twitched the corner of his mouth, looked at the bright and dark cloudy sky, and thought of a sentence: "The person who is close to the ink is black." Young ones don't dare. My subordinates dare not. Xiejin was injured and had difficulty moving. This matter must not be hidden from the Xie family. Instead of letting people speculate randomly, it is better to find a reason to silence everyone. Xian Yuanyao and Chu Nanyi helped the proud Zhu Ye in. There was a long way from the gate to Jinyuan. Xiejin was naturally sweating from the pain. He loved to be clean, so he was sweating and didn't want to lie down on the bed. Xian Yuanyao had no choice but to have someone bring in warm water, close the door, scrub him again, change his clothes, and then Xiejin lay down on the bed obediently. Master Zhu is indeed difficult to take care of. Chu Nanyi waited for them to finish cleaning up before coming in. While changing Xiejin's dressing, he briefly cleaned his back. You'd better not move around in the past 2 days. 3 days are not much. If you don't want the wound to burst, just stay in bed. Xiejin said calmly, keep some ointment and let Yao Yao change it for me at night. Although Xian Yuanyao is not a doctor, injuries are common in the military camp, and the job of applying medicine is indeed not difficult for him. Prince Yao himself is still injured, so you have the nerve to order him around. Xiejin glared at him, secretly wondering which pot he would not open or pick up. Didn't he know that Yao Yao was injured? Yao Yao didn't dare to sit down in the carriage just now. He was asked to leave the ointment to apply it on Yao Yao. How could he be so tactless? Chu Nanyi almost laughed when he met Xiejin's condemning eyes. So he was blamed for this? I don't know who asked for death. Not only did he get punished, but also Xian Yuanyao was implicated. Even he, a doctor, had to run in and out to help them. But it was obviously unreasonable to talk to Master Xieju. From the back to the back of the buttocks and legs, the purple and swollen marks were really scary. Chu Nanyi saw that he was a seriously injured patient and was too lazy to argue with him. This box of ointment is enough for an ordinary family to spend for a year. Chu Nanyi said in a light tone, you are so good, you use up a box a day. Xiejin had no idea how much an ordinary family spends in a year, and only said, you are so rich, but you can't bear to spend this little ointment? It turns out that the more you have, the more stingy you become. You are rich and unkind. Chu Nanyi is not stingy, Xian Yuanyao said. Last time, he allocated 100,000 taels of silver to me and used it to buy military equipment. Xiejin frowned. Yao Yao, which family are you from? Chu Nanyi chuckled slowly. Prince Yao is a descendant of the royal family. Could it be that Master Xieju has any other ideas? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 574. Whether the speaker has any intention or not is unknown, but the listener has intention is certain. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin were silent for a while, and the atmosphere was subtle. Master Chu, who was good at observing words and expressions, applied the medicine to Xiejin and left. Of course, he left 2 boxes of ointment before leaving. This medicine was made from the herbs he carefully prepared. It has excellent effects on external injuries, reducing swelling and relieving pain, promoting blood circulation and removing blood stasis, and promoting skin growth. Although it is not worth mentioning among those priceless holy medicines, it is also the most practical. Because the value is not too expensive, it is not painful for Xiejin to waste some of it. After Chu Nanyi left, the atmosphere in the room became more and more uncomfortable. Xiejin lay on the bed and broke the silence. Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes and looked at him. Let me see your wounds. Xian Yuanyao took a step back, with a look of caution in his eyes. No. Xiejin's wounds spread from his back to his calves. He was beaten a lot, so he was naturally injured everywhere, so it wouldn't be too embarrassing to see it. But the master hit him on his buttocks, how could he let him see it? Xiejin pursed his lips, and a sad look appeared on his face. Xian Yuanyao's heart tightened. I'm fine, you don't have to worry. Xiejin pursed his lips even tighter, lowered his eyelids, and gently rested his head on the pillow, looking sad and lonely. Xian Yuanyao frowned and looked at him. What was this expression? It looked like he was abandoned by him. Didn't you just not show him the wounds? Xian Yuanyao pondered for a while and said, you didn't sleep much last night, take a nap first and have a good rest these 2 days. Yao Yao didn't sleep either. Xiejin smiled lightly, you can worry about me, can't I worry about you? Xian Yuanyao was stunned and said hesitantly, that's not what I meant. Xiejin moved inside and made enough space to come out, come here. Xian Yuanyao didn't move. I am a seriously injured patient now and can't do anything. Are you still worried that I will harm you? Xiejin raised his eyes, you have seen me in such a miserable state, what else are you worried about? Xian Yuanyao was not worried, he just couldn't bring himself to lose face. After hesitating for a moment, he thought of the injuries on Xiejin's body and the only 3 days of vacation time to recover from the injuries. He felt a little bit reluctant in his heart, so he negotiated with him, don't laugh at me. Xiejin looked at him incredulously, why would I laugh at you? Xian Yuanyao pouted, walked over and lay down beside him, burying his head in his arms. Xiejin stood up slightly, took the ointment, and took off his pants, his pupils narrowed slightly. The master really showed no mercy. The 3 blood marks on the fair skin were particularly eye-catching, and all of them were swollen. 2 on the buttocks, 1 near the thigh root, more than 20 hits only left 3 blood marks. The skin was not broken, but the bruised and swollen scars seemed to break at any time, how could it not hurt? But the little leopard acted as if nothing had happened. Actually, it's okay, it really doesn't hurt. Xian Yuanyao didn't know if he was afraid that he would worry, and he took the initiative to speak while holding back the heat on his face. Compared to the military stick before, this is like tickling. If you hadn't insisted, I wouldn't have planned to apply the ointment. Xiejin didn't say anything, and used his fingers to scoop some ointment and applied it to him carefully. The inner room was quiet. I'm surprised that the master showed mercy today. Xian Yuanyao changed the subject, but the debts I wrote down are really annoying. Xiejin, you should be more careful in the future. Xiejin nodded, Yao Yao. What? The master may have known about our relationship. Xiejin pondered for a moment, thinking about what to say. Do you think the master would agree that we are together? Xian Yuanyao was shocked and turned to look at Xiejin. Did you talk nonsense in front of the master last night? How dare I? Xiejin shook his head, whatever, I didn't say that I was beaten like this. If you really dare to talk nonsense, do you think I can still talk to you soberly now? Xian Yuanyao saw that his expression did not seem to be lying, so he was relieved. He frowned and was silent for a moment. I'm afraid that the master may not accept this kind of thing. I think it's better not to talk about it for the time being. Wait for a good opportunity in the future, when the master is in a good mood, maybe. In a place where Xian Yuanyao couldn't see, the surprise in Xiejin's eyes and the smile at the corners of his mouth made him shine. The paleness on his face looked less tired and more bright. Yao Yao agreed, right? Although he had some intention of deliberately asking questions, Yao Yao really didn't object at all. And he said he would talk about it when the master was in a good mood in the future? If he hadn't been injured, Xiejin would definitely pick up the little leopard and jump around for a few times. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Xiejin slowly lay down beside him again, took his hand, and said softly, but I think the master may have guessed it, otherwise why would he let you rest for 3 days? Isn't it to take care of me? The master knows that you are thin-skinned and don't want others to see your injuries. But today in the imperial study, the master clearly saw it, and he should have known it in his heart. Xian Yuanyao frowned, "It's all your fault." "Yes, it's all my fault." Xie Jin admitted his mistake. "When my injury is healed, I will let you beat me up to vent your anger." Xian Yuanyao glared at him, "Am I that violent?" Xie Jin smiled mischievously, "Do you mean that the master is violent?" Xian Yuanyao was speechless. "I'm teasing you." Xie Jin held his hand, put it to his lips and kissed it. "Yao Yao, am I being selfish?" Xian Yuanyao was so kissed that he wanted to pull away his hand, but remembering the mistake in the imperial study room today, he didn't dare to use force for a moment. Hearing this, he subconsciously asked, "Why do you say that? If you stay with me, you won't be able to have children in the future." Xie Jin pursed his lips, "You won't have a beautiful wife or concubine either." "Who said that?" Xian Yuanyao raised his eyebrows. "You have so many beautiful concubines, so of course I can dash. The beautiful concubine in my backyard has been sent away long ago." Xian Yuanyao hesitated, and then said, "Where is the beautiful young man? They've made the best use of it and moved it elsewhere." Xian Yuanyao snorted, "No matter, I want to get married and have children anyway." Xie Jin bared his teeth, "You dare? You can't beat me now, and you will definitely not be able to beat me in the future." Xian Yuanyao challenged him, "You can imprison me if you can? I guess you don't have the guts." Xie Jin looked at him expressionlessly, but there was a hint of smile in his eyes. "The little leopard is also very cute when it opens its teeth and claws. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 575. Although the days of recuperation are painful, they are also filled with unspeakable happiness. Xie Jin ordered no one to disturb him. Except for Chu Nanyi, who would come over regularly to check on him, no one else was allowed to enter the house. Even 3 meals a day were delivered to the door by the maid. Xian Yuanyao was responsible for bringing them in and feeding them to Xie Jin himself. "Jin eats." Although the little leopard was also injured, it generally did not affect his movements. However, Xie Jin was more seriously injured. As we sympathized with each other, the one with minor injuries naturally had to take more care of the one with serious injuries. Something was different in these 3 days. Although neither of them said anything, they seemed to be acquiescing to the progress of some things. Compared with the warmth and tranquility in Jinyuan, there was already a storm outside. The case of Prince Wei's mansion set off a huge wave in the long quiet imperial capital. The civil and military officials in the court were as silent as a cicada. All officials who had had contact with Prince Wei's mansion were in danger, for fear that the regent would order a thorough investigation and implicate some unrelated people. Unfortunately, the rebellion case of Prince Wei really has nothing to do with them. Who knows why Xuan Yuanyan suddenly couldn't think about it and actually came up with the idea of a jade seal. Do you want to take advantage of the fact that the Prince Regent and Her Majesty the Queen are not in court, steal the jade seal, and wait for an opportunity to plan for the throne? But when he was the grandson of the Emperor, he was not able to ascend the throne. Now that the Queen has ascended the throne and the Regent has the power, he actually dares to think that he can sit on the throne? There was a roar in the wind. Since ancient times, whenever a minister's house is confiscated, it will be followed by a bloody storm, and the blood of the imperial capital will not dissipate for a long time. The killings of emperors always make people feel frightened. This time should be no exception. However, fortunately, the regent did not intend to take this opportunity to implicate the old ministers and members of the Wei Palace. This undoubtedly made people feel worried, but they breathed a long sigh of relief. The day after the house was confiscated, Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent issued a direct decree in the morning meeting that the Wei Palace had conspired to rebel and was exiled to the Mobei frontier fortress to build a city. He would not be allowed to return to the court in this life. This verdict was beyond the minister's expectations. It's not a capital crime. Her Majesty the Queen is indeed kind. The ministers shouted "Long live," and the words of praise resounded throughout the hall, and they were happy that they had such a wise and tolerant queen. Of course, whether they were really happy or taking this opportunity to sing praises, probably only the ministers themselves knew. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao, who were staying in Jinyuan to recuperate, soon learned the news. Naturally, it was Chu Nanyi who brought the news to Jinyuan. This is retribution for the idiots in King Wei's family. Xiejin barely clapped his hands after hearing this. Your Majesty is worthy of being your Majesty, and I won't accept it even if I don't accept it. Chu Nanyi frowned. You just got beaten and you learned how to flatter. I am telling the truth. Xiejin glanced at him lightly and said in a calm tone, flattery is something only a treacherous minister would do. Yesterday afternoon, he slept for half a day and one night. Master Ju was in good spirits today and his eyes were intimidating. Chu Nanyi sneered. The capital crime will definitely cause panic among the ministers, and will also give people the impression of ruthlessness. Xian Yuanyao stood aside with a teacup. Besides, the emperor's grandfather is still here, so the Lord can be regarded as giving the emperor a chance to save face. Being exiled for 3,000 miles not only gave King Wei's family the punishment they deserved, but also left others speechless. Exile is not necessarily better than death penalty. Not to mention the long distance, most people cannot endure the punishment of walking 3,000 miles in shackles. Even if they can reach the border safely in the end, they will have to do hard labor for the rest of their lives and have to endure it day and night. The overseer whipped and cursed. No one can guarantee how long they can last. However, on the surface, His Majesty did give them a way to survive. He did not take their lives directly, and did not stain his hands with blood when he first ascended the throne. For the rebellious ministers, this is enough to reflect the benevolence and tolerance of the current emperor. Mind. Kill several birds with one stone. How could you not say a word about Regent Chengming? How is Xianyuan Chen? Xiejin thought about it. Did the Lord tell me how to deal with him? Xianyuan Yao said calmly, the Lord thinks highly of him, so of course he won't do anything to him. Is Ajin so worried? Chu Nanyi's expression paused slightly. This tone doesn't seem right. Xiejin naturally heard the sourness in Little Leopard's tone, and secretly rejoiced, but pretended not to know anything on his face, and slowly shook his head. It's not that I'm afraid of what the Lord will do to him, but that he, the bastard of the Wei Palace, after all, his identity is embarrassing. If something happens to Prince Wei's family, the mansion will be sealed off. He and his biological mother, Aunt Jiao, will move out soon, but I don't know if the accommodation has been arranged. Didn't Ajin bring Xianyuan Chen to live in Jinyuan before? Xianyuan Yao said in a calm tone, this time I will simply take him over to stay for a few days. Aunt Jiao can also ask Auntie to make arrangements and stay at Xie's house temporarily. What did Yao Yao say? Xiejin frowned. Xianyuan Chen and I are not relatives, and it is impossible for Aunt Jiao to live in someone else's house at will. This arrangement is not appropriate at all. Chu Nanyi silently packed the medicine box, turned around and walked out without saying a word. Besides, I'm injured now, so how can I have time to entertain guests? Xiejin sighed, I only have 3 days to recover from my injuries. After 3 days, I have to go to the palace to wait for orders. The Lord said that I need to practice my skills. I'm afraid that I'll be accused of laziness again, and I might have to take a few more beatings. Xianyuan Yao looked at him without saying a word, and said calmly for a moment, you are not a military commander, and the Lord does not have such high requirements for your martial arts. Yao Yao Xiejin's eyes were burning. Even if you want to be jealous, don't be so obvious. Chu Nanyi was there just now. It would be bad if he saw it. Xianyuan Yao frowned. Besides, I only like Yao Yao. I don't have any thoughts about other people at all, Xiejin said, sighing softly, very resentful. Yao Yao has seen my body naked. Yao Yao must be responsible for me. Xianyuan Yao raised his eyebrows and stared fiercely at a fox who didn't know how to behave even when he was injured. Yao Yao, Come here. Xiejin stretched out his hand and waved at him, like calling a kitten, lie down with me for a while. Xian Yuanyao said indifferently, you can only lie down, not lie down. I made a slip of the tongue. Xiejin said, lie down with me for a while. Xian Yuanyao said, I don't want to lie there, like a fool. Xiejin was immediately wronged. Yao Yao means that I am like a fool. It's not stupid to lie down alone, but it's not normal for two people to lie there together. Xian Yuanyao said indifferently, you should take good care of your injuries and don't think about anything messy. Xiejin thought to himself, this little leopard really likes to say one thing and mean another. It was obviously him who was jealous first, but he had to be stubborn and refused to admit it, and said that he was just imagining things. Xiejin thought so, and his voice became softer, you can't sit for the time being, it will be more comfortable to lie down here, you can't stand there all the time, it's so tiring. Author has something to say. Here is a little explanation. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin are Rong Yu's favorites, so his punishment has some personal nature. Xiejin is a 5th rank official. According to the rules, he should not hold great power. Rong Yu gave him great power in an invisible way, not in the open. Xiejin's mistake violated Rong Yu's rules, but according to his official title, the assassination in the imperial study was not within his scope of responsibility, and the theft of the jade seal was not his responsibility. Don't forget that he is a civil official. Rong Yu's requirements for the people he is closest to and trust are more stringent, so punishment must be given, but he also protects his children and will appropriately protect the pride of Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao. So it is right that the punishment is not made public. Well, in fact, apart from age, Rong Yu does have the intention of raising Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao as sons. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 576. Here Xiejin used his fox characteristics and started to tease Xian Yuanyao when he had time, only to lure the little leopard into the trap he had set. The atmosphere in the palace was becoming more and more tense day by day. The Queen Mother arrived at the Dajhan Palace in person, lowered her figure and spoke softly, hoping that Nan 11 would go easy on Xian Yuanyan's family of 3 for the sake of Fang Lanyi having a child in her belly. At least the child is innocent. It is even more pitiful to have a child without a father after he is born. However, when Nan 11 heard this, she just smiled faintly, Fang Lanyi is not pregnant. That was a lie deliberately fabricated by Xian Yuanyan in order to coax the Supreme Emperor to relent. After the words fell, the Queen Mother's expression suddenly changed, with a look of disbelief on her face. Fang Lanyi was injured. Apart from beating, scolding and abusing her, Xuan Yuanyan rarely showed any tenderness to her. Nan 11 sipped her tea and said in a calm voice, it should be Princess Wei who used her children to regain the favor of the Supreme Emperor. It's a great idea, but unfortunately, although the method is good, it is no match for Xian Yuanyan's pursuit of death. After all, the Supreme Emperor was indeed soft-hearted towards Xian Yuanyan. If Fang Lanyi is really pregnant, Xuan Yuanyan will learn to cherish her love after regaining his favor, and stop thinking about unrealistic things. The Supreme Emperor will still regard him as his favorite grandson, and the Wei Palace may not end up like this. General situation. It's a pity that there is no shortage of people who overestimate their abilities in this world. Nan 11 knew that the verdict of the Wei Palace had been handed down, and the Queen Mother wanted to find another chance for Xuan Yuanyan, but the fact was that it was absolutely impossible. She would not give Xian Yuanyan another chance. The Queen Mother's expression changed, her eyes fell on Nan 11's calm and beautiful face, and she couldn't react for a long time. Is Fang Lanyi's pregnancy fake? She clenched her hands tightly, not expecting that the last glimmer of hope was shattered. She was suddenly surrounded by a strong sense of powerlessness. After sitting in silence for a long time, she finally nodded feebly, stood up, and left. Nan 11 had no reaction to this. In her opinion, in addition to their own suicide and unrealistic desire for power, the reason why the Wei Palace ended up as it did today was that the Supreme Emperor and the Queen Mother also had unshirkable responsibilities. It is normal for a grandfather to love his grandson, and it is normal for the emperor to want to restore the orthodox bloodline and inherit the throne. But the mistake was that he chose an idiot as the crown prince. This idiot is not only incompetent, but also violent, selfish, narrow-minded, and extremely stupid. He has neither the kindness and tolerance of a king nor the most basic moral bottom line that a person should have. If the Supreme Emperor could understand Xian Yuanyan's nature as soon as possible and end his greed for the throne, the Wei Palace would at least have a good death. It's a pity that everything was not known earlier. Things in Prince Wei's mansion no longer occupied Nan 11's time. She was mindful of Xian Yuanjia's marriage, and on February 12, Chu Hongai's first day of taking office, she took the initiative to summon Princess Jing into the palace to talk about it. The Prime Minister's son likes Jia, but the Prime Minister is relatively low-key and doesn't like marrying royal family members, so he doesn't particularly approve of the marriage. Nan 11 sipped her tea, her voice was calm, and there's the one in red. After getting married to Prince Qi, Prince Jing's palace has become more popular. There are many people who want to go to Prince Jing's palace to propose marriage. Prime Minister Liu has some scruples, fearing that getting married to Prince Jing's palace at this time will arouse some suspicion. As he said that, he laughed first. Although I am very optimistic about them, it can't stop them from thinking that I will have some ideas. In fact, they are overthinking. I am happy to see lovers finally get married. As long as she does not deliberately pursue the combination of interests, even if both men and women have prominent families, she will not have any thoughts of fear, and wrong you will not have any thoughts either. There is a ready-made example right in front of us, Xian Yuanqi and Chu Hongai. Princess Jing obviously understood what she meant, and remained silent for a moment. Jia is just a concubine, and she cannot match her status as the legitimate son of the Prime Minister's mansion. There are no legitimate daughters in Prince Jing's mansion. If Jia calls you mother, a concubine is equivalent to half a legitimate daughter. Nan 11 smiled. Besides, Prince Jing's mansion is a royal family, and although Prime Minister Liu is the Prime Minister, his foundation is still shallow. The residence is simple, and Jia is more than suitable for Mr. Liu. Marriages between royal family members and official families usually focus on matching families and combining interests. The unwritten rule is generally that men marry at a lower age and women at a higher age. For example, Mr. Liu of the Prime Minister's palace, the wife he wants to marry should not be of a higher family background than the Liu family. He can choose a legitimate daughter of a comparable or slightly lower family background as his head wife. Jia was born in Prince Jing's palace, and his status as Prince Jing surpassed that of Prime Minister Liu, but because he was a commoner, a compromise was considered a good match. However, being well matched is actually a relative term. After all, no matter how many marriages there are, they are insignificant in front of the emperor's marriage. Princess Jing obviously understood what Nan 11 meant and nodded slowly. Your Majesty has the final say. Princess is Jia's mother, and you should make the decision on her marriage. Nan 11 smiled gently. I am just trying to find a matchmaker to bring this couple together. For the rest, Princess can talk to you in private. Mrs. Liu will discuss and make the decision. Does this mean you don't intend to grant a marriage? Princess Jing thought for a moment and understood that Nan 11 was respecting her. As the mistress of Prince Jing's house, Jia's marriage should have been decided by her mother. It was not impossible for the queen to grant a marriage, but the royal relatives and dignitaries were always sensitive to the emperor's thoughts. Apart from anything else, if Nan 11 really proposes marriage to Jia, the other clan princesses will inevitably suspect that Jia has obtained the favor and her status has surpassed that of the princess, or that Her Majesty the Queen is dissatisfied with Princess Jing. Is that why Jia was granted marriage to a concubine? If other concubines acted like this, it would obviously bring about an unpleasant atmosphere. Princess Jing couldn't help but have such thoughts in her heart, so when she heard Nan 11 asked her to discuss and decide with Madame Lu, although her face didn't change, her mood was slightly better. After happily agreeing to this matter, she took her leave and left the Dajhan Palace. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 577. February 12th was the last day of vacation for Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin. Xiejin's injury had not healed yet, and he could only get out of bed and walk. Any big movement would still hurt the wound, not to mention fighting. There was no need to think about it. Xian Yuanyao was better off. All three scars had scarred. Although it was still painful when he sat down, he was a military commander and didn't take this injury seriously, not to mention that he had been recovering for 3 days. During dinner in the evening, Xian Yuanyao looked at him with some concern. I will return to the barracks tonight, you take good care of yourself, and behave well in front of the master after entering the palace tomorrow. Be good, and don't do anything you shouldn't do. If you anger the master again, I can't save you. Xiejin's expression was subtle. Yao Yao, you didn't save me this time either. Xian Yuanyao choked. Didn't I take care of you for 3 days? Serving you tea and water, bathing you, feeding you, serving you like an old nanny, and you are still not satisfied. Xiejin smiled with his lips curled, his phoenix eyes full of charm. Satisfied? How could I not be satisfied? It's a pity that the master only gave 3 days, if it were a few more days it would be more perfect. As he said, he sighed deeply. In fact, it would be good if the master finished beating all 5 canes, maybe give him a few more days off to recover from his injuries. Ajin Xian Yuanyao frowned and looked at him as if he was a lunatic. Do you deserve to be tortured? Xiejin was silent immediately. If you really don't want to be beaten, I can do it for you, Xian Yuanyao said in a light tone, but I'm not as merciful as the master, nor do I have as much time as the master. I'll beat you with a military stick and I guarantee you can stay at home and rest for 2 months. Xiejin looked at his expressionless but really beautiful face, and raised the corner of his lips. As long as Yao Yao can do it, I have no problem. Xian Yuanyao. Sure enough, he deserves to be tortured. I can't bear to be separated from you. Xiejin lay on the bedside, holding his chin and looking at him. Otherwise, I will give up my ambition to be an official in the court, follow you into the military camp, and be a soldier under you. Okay. Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly, looked at him calmly for a long time, and nodded slowly. I have no problem, as long as you are not afraid that the master will peel your skin. Why is Yao Yao so unlovable? Xiejin sighed melancholy. It's not very authentic to always use the master to pressure others. Xian Yuanyao said, I'm just telling you the consequences of seeking death. If you don't use the master to pressure others, who can suppress this fox? Xiejin looked at him with a burning gaze, which only made Xian Yuanyao's face hot. I really can't bear to be separated from you. The voice is low and gentle, with a sense of bewitching and provocative. Xian Yuanyao felt uncomfortable when he looked at him. It's not like we won't have the chance to meet in the future. We're both in the imperial city, but one is in the city and the other is outside the city. What's there to be reluctant about? I just want to be with you every day. Xian Yuanyao met his affectionate gaze, and his whole body was numb. He couldn't stand the pressure. He subconsciously turned his head to look out the window, but saw Chu Nanyi coming over with a medicine box, and he was relieved immediately. Chu Nanyi is here, he told Xiejin, then walked over to open the door. Looking at Chu Nanyi in a blue shirt, he said lightly, thank you for your hard work, running here 3 times a day. Chu Nanyi smiled gracefully. it's not as hard as Prince Yao, taking care of seriously injured people for 12 hours a day. Xian Yuanyao said in a low voice. He always felt that Chu Nanyi and Xiejin were both old foxes who had practiced for thousands of years, but Xiejin disdained to hide. Everyone knew that he was cunning and not easy to mess with, while Chu Nanyi was good at disguise, and good at using a warm and kind smile to cover up his true nature. I have good news for you. Chu Nanyi walked past the bed, put down the medicine box, and reached out to help Xiejin undress. He said, Her Majesty will hold a poetry meeting in the palace tomorrow, and has invited several unmarried princes from the imperial capital to the palace. You two are also among them. What? Xian Yuanyao was stunned. Poetry meeting. What poetry meeting? Xiejin frowned, and had a bad premonition in his heart. Her Majesty just returned to the imperial capital, why did she think of holding a poetry meeting? And all the invited princes are young princes. His eyebrows moved, and he had to make the worst guess. Will there be another minister who doesn't know how to live or die to persuade His Majesty to choose a royal husband? As soon as these words came out, the air suddenly became quiet. This. Xian Yuanyao's face changed. The master should not agree. Is it too late for him to pretend to be sick now? Chu Nanyi glanced at him lightly. Do you think it's possible? Choose a royal husband? Xiejin thought about it and felt it was unlikely. If Her Majesty really had this idea, his master's temperament would not do anything to the queen, but all the men who might be chosen as the emperor's husband would probably not even have their bodies left. Her Majesty brought back a girl from the Great Zhou. Chu Nanyi said in a light tone, she should want to choose a husband for this girl. Xian Yuanyao's eyes lit up when he heard this. A girl from the Great Zhou? Is she pretty? Xiejin looked up at him. She should be pretty. Chu Nanyi focused on changing the medicine for Xiejin, and said in a calm tone, but it doesn't really matter whether she's pretty or not. One thing is certain, the woman who can be brought back by Her Majesty must have a good relationship with Her Majesty, and the person who marries her will surely be very successful in the future, and his future is limitless. Xian Yuanyao nodded, thinking, this is true, so there must be many people who want to marry her. Xiejin lowered his eyes, and his delicate eyebrows were filled with a bit of unfathomable color. Chu Nanyi, I think this is your chance. Xian Yuanyao said seriously, marry a girl who has a good relationship with Her Majesty. Just because of the degree to which the Lord loves Her Majesty, your status and position will definitely rise in the future. Maybe you can even become a royal relative. Xiejin's eyes became more careful, and he slowly raised his eyes, looking at the little leopard with a little more playful smile in his eyes. Yao Yao is right. Xiejin's voice was light, leisurely, you can seize the opportunity. Seize. Chu Nanyi smiled at the corner of his lips, I already have a girl I like. Huh? Xiejin looked at him inquiringly, really? Absolutely true. Chu Nanyi stood up, I think you two should be careful. Master Xieju is good looking and has a high status and family background. Many girls in the imperial capital admire him. Maybe this girl from the Great Zhou will also be attracted to him at first sight. If you ask the queen to grant a marriage at that time. Impossible. Xiejin said indifferently, Your Majesty will not grant a marriage casually. I'm talking about if. Chu Nanyi smiled casually, Prince Yao is also a royal noble, a prince, and a heroic and handsome general. He may also become the man that the girl likes. Xian Yuanyao frowned, it shouldn't be. Why not? Chu Nanyi smiled lightly, if there was no such idea, why would His Majesty let you go? Xiejin was originally full of confidence, but after hearing what he said, he suddenly felt a sense of crisis. They haven't seen this girl from Dezhou yet, and they don't know what kind of personality she has. If she is a nymphomaniac, I'm afraid it will be difficult to deal with. Chu Nanyi changed the medicine for him, packed up, and turned around and left leisurely, not caring about the news he brought and what kind of stone his words would throw in Xiejin's heart. Wait. Xiejin frowned, Chu Nanyi, You said if I get sick. Chu Nanyi turned around and smiled contentedly. If Master Sieju wants to die, don't drag me down with you. I don't want to try the Master's method. The meaning is very simple. If you want to get sick, it's your own business, and I won't cooperate. As expected, people's hearts are revealed in times of trouble. Siejin sneered, I have seen you clearly. Chu Nanyi bowed gracefully, my honor. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 578. After Chu Nanyi left, Siejin lay on the pillow and sighed. Your Majesty is not a tyrant, and Her Majesty the Queen is not an unreasonable person. There is no way that you can mess up the rules. You don't have to do this. Xian Yuanyao couldn't see his appearance and frowned. Besides, does this girl know how to do it? I'm not sure I'm attracted to you yet, so don't worry too much for now. Siejin lay weakly on the pillow. You don't understand. Why don't I understand? The man is unmarried and the woman is unmarried. If His Majesty really wants to get married, do I dare to resist the decree? Siejin raised his eyes and looked at him. Even if I resist the decree, there must be a valid reason. Xian Yuanyao was silent. Siejin coughed lightly. Yao Yao, how about we? No, Xian Yuanyao flatly refused, obviously understanding what he was going to say. Now is not the time. Siejin pursed his lips and looked at him aggrievedly. Xian Yuanyao felt numb all over when he looked at him. His brows furrowed again and again, and he didn't know what expression to put on. Don't think about this for now. Let's adapt to the situation tomorrow, he said, with a somewhat comforting tone. If it doesn't work, this matter. Siejin's expression tightened. If it doesn't work, what will happen to you? Xian Yuanyao glanced at him and said nothing. If it really doesn't work, he can just ask the Lord. What else can he do? Since he had to enter the palace early tomorrow morning, Xian Yuanyao had to give up his decision to go back to the military camp tonight, so Siejin had another chance to spend one night with the little leopard. It is said that Siejin kept emphasizing that night, if that girl from Dazhu falls in love with you, you must tell her that you already have someone you like. If he falls in love with me, I will definitely ignore her. I can express my sincerity towards Yao Yao. Yao Yao, if you are kidnapped by another girl, I will have nothing to live for. Just wait and collect the body for me. Yao Yao, did you hear what I said? Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao was so annoyed that he slapped his scarred butt. Shut up. Hiss. Siejin's face turned pale in pain, he broke into a cold sweat, and finally shut up and became quiet. The next morning, Siejin, who was dressed in strict and handsome official uniform, got up early and entered the palace with Xian Yuanyao. The two went to the court first, and then followed Rongyu to the Kinzen Hall to discuss matters. They had a tacit understanding for the whole day. Didn't mention the poetry meeting. It was not until the discussion at the Kinzen Palace was over that the other ministers resigned one by one and left. Siejin, who had been standing for a long time, looked up at Rongyu and said after careful consideration, Your Majesty. Rongyu grunted and handed the approved booklet to the waiter waiting aside. What's the matter? I heard that His Majesty summoned several young men from aristocratic families today. Rongyu raised her eyes slightly, looking at him with a deep look. What do you want to say? Siejin was silent. It didn't seem like what he wanted to say. But what is the purpose of Her Majesty the Queen summoning the young master of the aristocratic family? The Lord is not in a hurry at all. Also, didn't Chu Nanyi say that he and Little Leopard were among them? But it was already noon now, and he and Little Leopard were still staying in Kinzen Hall. This doesn't seem to make sense. You two will stay at the Dajhan Palace for lunch. Rongyu finished handling the matters at hand, picked up the teacup, and took a slow sip. I have something for you to do. Hearing the first half of the sentence, Siejin's scalp went numb, thinking that Her Majesty the Queen would not really want to match them up with the Dezhou girl, but she actually stayed for dinner? After hearing the second half of the sentence, Xiejin's suspicion immediately dissipated. The secret master's tone sounded like it was for business, and it should have nothing to do with the wedding. So is what Chu Nanyi said true or false? That guy didn't seem to be brave enough to pretend to preach the imperial edict. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao both had doubts in their minds, but they didn't say anything more and both agreed. Rong Yu looked up at Xiejin at this moment, his eyes calm and deep. Xiejin's back tensed up at the sight, and he subconsciously felt a dense and severe pain starting to appear behind him again. He would never forget that kind of pain, like hot oil rolling over him. "How's the injury?" Rong Yu's tone was calm, and there was no hint of emotion or anger. Xiejin's face was still a bit pale as if he was just recovering from an illness, and all the injuries on his body were not healed. After standing for so long, in addition to pain, there was also a bit of itchiness from the scars, and he didn't feel very good. However, thinking of little leopard telling him to be good and behave well, Xiejin himself was not a person who liked to be miserable at any time, so he lowered his eyes and said, "It's much better now. Thank you, Lord, for thinking about me. Miss." Rong Yu put down the teacup without comment, stood up and walked out of Qinzhen Hall. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao looked at each other, both of them a little confused. Today's situation seemed to be a little different than expected. But now is not a good time to say yes. The two of them quickly followed Rong Yu and walked to the Dajhan Palace together. The palace corridors are winding and winding, the spring scenery is charming, and the fragrance is lingering everywhere in the palace. The three of them were silent all the way. Nan 11 has ordered the palace staff to prepare lunch in the Dajhan Palace. There are more than 20 dishes placed on the long table. In addition to Nan 11, the eldest princess is also there, as well as a girl of 16 or 17 years old. She has a pretty and charming appearance, and looks calmer than the average little girl. Judging from the fact that she is wearing the clothes of a noble lady, it is obvious that she is not a palace maid of the Taisho Palace. So it must be the girl from Dazhu. Xiejin knew what was going on, so he withdrew his gaze, and together with Xian Yuanyao, he bowed to Nan 11 as a monarch and his ministers. After the ceremony, everyone sat down. The moment Xiejin sat on the stool, his body subconsciously tensed, then slowly relaxed, slowly adapting to the feeling of sitting on a hard wooden stool for the first time after being beaten. Well, the taste is wonderful. But compared to this ecstasy, the atmosphere after sitting down is more subtle. Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent will definitely sit in the main seat. At the moment, the Princess and Linjia are sitting next to Nan 11, and Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao are sitting below Rong Yu. So whether it is Xiejin or Xian Yuanyao, they can see Linjia and the princess opposite them as soon as they raise their heads. Xiaojin doesn't look well. The princess noticed that Xiejin's face was a little pale, and a caring look appeared on her face. "Are you sick?" "No." Xiejin shook his head. "I accidentally hurt myself, thank you for your concern." The princess heard this and nodded gently. "Be careful in the future." "Yes." Xiejin, Prince Yao. Nan 11 raised her lips and smiled lightly. "Let me introduce someone to you. This girl is Linjia, the princess of Dezhou, Rong Yu's junior. This time she came to Dongling with me and will settle down. I want to choose a suitable husband for her. Your Majesty." Xiejin stood up suddenly. "I already have someone I like." After the voice fell, the air in the hall suddenly became quiet. Warm reminder: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 579. Several pairs of eyes fell on his face, with different expressions. Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly, then looked at him thoughtfully and said nothing. Why are you so anxious? Nan 11 raised her lips with a hint of a smile. I just want to say that Jia's daughter is not in the public eye very often. You and Prince Yao usually come into contact with many outstanding men. Let's see if there are any suitable ones. You can give me some advice. Xian Yuanyao secretly cursed a bitch fox. He couldn't hold his breath anymore. Where had his usual poise, depth, and energy gone? Xiao Jin has someone he likes? I wonder who it is. The eldest princess looked at him with a playful expression. But which girl in the imperial capital is talented and beautiful? I should know her. The eldest princess knows him. Xie Jin's voice was calm, but he is not a girl with both talent and beauty. It should be said that he is a girl with both civil and military skills. Xian Yuanyao's face changed slightly. This damn fox. What nonsense are you talking about? He glanced quickly at Nan 11 and Rong Yu, then looked away as if being burned by fire, his heart beating like thunder. Rong Yu's expression was calm, with no fluctuations in mood or anger. Nan 11's expression was gentle, but she also looked enigmatic, which made people feel even more unsure. I will pay attention. Xie Jin narrowed his eyes and said before the eldest princess continued to ask, if there is a suitable young talent, I will definitely match him with Miss Lin. Lin Jie looked at him without saying a word, feeling that this handsome young man seemed a little uncomfortable. With his pale face and frowning from time to time, he must be enduring some discomfort. But she didn't say anything. She smiled faintly when she heard the words, actually, I'm not in a hurry. Marriage is about fate, but I still want to thank you, sir. Xie Jin stood with his eyebrows lowered and his thin lips pursed slightly. He noticed the playful or calm eyes on the table, and couldn't help but thinking he wanted to be so impulsive. If the stool wasn't so hard that he couldn't sit on it, he could have calmed down. Sit down, Nan 11 said gently, don't be too formal. Xie Jin is really not a prude. He just took this opportunity to stand up slowly, because his butt hurt too much. But can this reason be given? If he really dares to say it, the Lord will allow him to sit on the stool for 5 hours and feel the ecstasy. Thank you, Your Majesty. Xie Jin took a deep breath and slowly sat down. I don't know if they noticed his physical discomfort and were taking care of his face, or if they really didn't have anything else important to say next, so they had a peaceful meal. Xie Jin survived until the end of lunch. After the meal, Her Majesty the Queen and the eldest princess stayed in the Dajhan Palace to take care of Hao-er. Rong Yu ordered Xie Jin and Xian Yuanyao to follow him to the imperial study to discuss matters. Hearing the words royal study room, Xie Jin's spine tensed subconsciously. It's really not a pleasant place to be. He thought again and again, and even turned to Xian Yuanyao to confirm, in the past 3 days, I have not made any unforgivable mistakes, right? Xian Yuanyao also frowned slightly and shook his head slowly. You didn't make a mistake, don't be nervous. It's not that Xie Jin is sensitive, but that what Rong Yu said 3 days ago is still echoing in his ears. From now on, the place of discussion will be moved to Kinzen Hall. This royal study is reserved for you too. The cane can be soaked at any time. Only 3 days have passed, and I can't forget it even if I want to. Rong Yu didn't pay attention to the eye contact between the two people behind him. He walked into the imperial study, took a file from the imperial desk and threw it to Xie Jin. You two go to Shangning to investigate the Yun family. Xie Jin took the file, his expression changed to a deep expression in a moment, his eyes fell on the file, his delicate eyebrows were filled with deep thought. The Yun family and the Su family seem to be related by marriage. Su family? Xian Yuanyao frowned. Su Ce, Minister of Household Affairs. When it comes to the Ministry of Household Affairs, most people think of corruption. It is obviously unrealistic to say how incorruptible an official in charge of the treasury is. However, when the water is clear, there will be no fish. What the king needs is not an honest official who has a lot of money, but an honest official who has a lot of money. A capable minister who can run errands well and has a bit of desire. A capable minister also needs to eat, drink, have sex, deal with favors, and support his family, so he should be greedy appropriately. As long as it does not exceed the bottom line and his appetite is not too big, most kings will turn a blind eye. However, there are rules for being greedy for ink. If the appetite is too big, the ambition is ambitious, and the degree of corruption is beyond the bottom line that the king can tolerate, involving collusion between officials and businessmen, and even seriously damaging the interests of the people and affecting the stability of the country, then it is not a matter of turning a blind eye. It's a matter of closing one eye. Xiejin's mind was spinning fast. His master said that he was investigating the Yun clan, so it was obviously not groundless, nor was he just being idle. Rather, it was the Yun clan who had done something they shouldn't have done. In other words, the Yun family and the Su family need to be rectified. I will give you manpower to investigate this matter secretly. There is no need to alert others wrong, you said in a calm tone. I want conclusive evidence. Xiejin accepted the order. Yes. The Yun family is quite powerful. The head of the Yun family is in Xiangning's hands and eyes. After you two go there, be patient. Don't be too anxious. Check it slowly. I will give you enough time. Wrong, you gave him. You can use the personal token. There is only one thing I will remember. His eyes fell on the two of them, and wrong, you said in a cold voice, the king asked you to investigate the case, not to let you go deep into danger, and if you dare to do anything to put yourself in danger, don't blame me for stripping you when you come back. Your skin. Although his voice was cold, it was so cold that Xiejin felt his arm begin to hurt again. But as if by miracle, a warm feeling slowly filled his heart. He realized that this was an opportunity for Rong Yu to give him experience, with no time limit, just to prevent him from taking risks. As long as they caught the big fish of Yun, he and Xian Yuanyao would have a firm foothold in the court. Even if the new nobles in the court had achievements, they could not go far just by relying on the emperor's favor, and could not convince people. Only political achievements were the most solid and powerful evidence. Xiejin knelt on one knee and bowed his head to accept the order. I will obey the order of the Lord. After arriving in Xiangning, I will be careful and cautious, and dare not be negligent and willful. Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips, with some hidden worries in his heart. The Yun family has deep roots, and the background of the Su family extends to Xiangning. It is not something that ordinary people can pry open. My lord, the two of us, Ajin and I dash. Did the king say that the power in your hands cannot be used? Wrong, you said in a faint voice, just don't put yourself in danger. No matter what other methods you use, the king will not interfere. Xian Yuanyao was silent. The power in their hands? To be honest, his father is far away in Huainan, and his power cannot reach Xiangning at all. He only has 18 guards under his command, unless Xiejin has someone available. Thinking of this, Xian Yuanyao turned his head and looked at Xiejin, thinking that Ajin should be confident, otherwise he would not dare to take on such a heavy task. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 580. After receiving the order, Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao left the palace without delay. One returned to the Xie family and the other returned to the military camp. Xiejin was responsible for packing the luggage, bringing some clothes for the journey and enough silver bills. Xian Yuanyao went back to the military camp and slightly adjusted the training process that needed to be done next. He arranged a few trusted generals to supervise the training. He could not be sure when he would return on this long trip, so the training in the military camp was mainly physical and personal training. Horseback archery, foot archery, gun skills, and single soldier combat were all projects that needed to be focused on. As for some military tactics and formations, they could only be arranged after he came back. On the evening of February 12, the two left the imperial capital with a light carriage. Their injuries had not healed yet, so they could not think about riding horses for the time being. The large carriage was covered with soft blankets and all the ointments were brought with them. It takes 7 or 8 days to get from the imperial capital to Shangning. The time on the road is just right for recuperation. By the time you arrive in Shangning, your injuries should have recovered and will not affect your work. Chu Hongii officially replaced the position of the commander of the Imperial Guards. She was on duty for 3 hours every day in front of Her Majesty the Queen, entering the palace at noon and returning to the palace at noon. In the morning, Nangzi would go to court with the regent to discuss politics. With Ranjiao there, no one else was needed. After lunch, Ranjiao usually went to the Kinzen Hall to discuss matters with the ministers. Although Nangzi was protected by Yunyu and Yin's Huang, they were just guards after all. Chu Hongii could discuss some important matters of the court by following her and learn more about the situation inside and outside the palace and the court officials. If Ranjiao had less work in the afternoon and returned to Dajhan Palace early, Chu Hongii would patrol the palace and reorganize the imperial guards with great tact, leaving space for Her Majesty the Queen and the regent to be alone. To be the commander of the imperial guards, besides being highly skilled in martial arts and strong in ability, one must also be considerate, know how to read people's expressions, and know when to stay and when to leave. I think not everyone can do this. It was the end of February in a flash, and Haoer's 1-year-old birthday arrived. Rongyu ordered people to set up a birthday banquet in the Dajhan Palace. In addition to the eldest princess, only a few important officials in the court, such as Prince Huai, Prince Jing, Prime Minister Xie, and Prime Minister Liu, as well as Xian Yuanqi and his wife, and the two sons Xian Yuanchen and Xian Yuanhua, were invited to attend. There were many good things on the long rosewood table. Memorials, jade seals, abacus, rattles, folding fans, daggers, several black iron tokens, jade pendants, 4 treasures of the study, a plate of crispy and soft snacks, and a few wheat ears. Haoer, who had just turned 1 year old, was placed on the table. The child had reached the stage of toddling. Although his steps were not very stable, he could walk for a while. Rongyu and Nan 11 stood aside, quietly watching their son's performance today. Haoer lifted his little feet and walked slowly on the table, passing all the randomly placed gifts, from one end of the long table to the other. All the clan elders and ministers stood on both sides of the table, protecting the little prince at any time to prevent him from falling off the table. Fortunately, the child walked from one end to the other, staggered and fell for a while, and then simply climbed up on the table. In the first round, he ignored all the gifts. He walked back and forth, walked to the end, turned around and climbed back again. When passing by the memorial, Haoer finally stopped, stretched out his little hand to pick up the memorial and read it through. There was no expression on his noble little face, no excitement, as if he was studying what it was, and he had a calm demeanor that was exactly the same as his father. After a moment, he looked up at his father and mother standing next to him, staggered to his feet with the memorial, and handed it to his father under the gaze of many people. Rongyu did not say anything, but took the memorial silently. The eldest princess could not help but sighed, Haoer is really smart. The child turned back to the table, crawled again, reached out to pick up the jade seal. Well, he grabbed it with his little hands and found that he could not lift it, and he grabbed it hard, but still could not lift it. The rattle was placed next to him, but he did not even look at it, as if he was determined to fight with the jade seal to the end. But a 1-year-old child is really weak. Haoer fell on the table, his little hands protecting the jade seal, and he really used all his strength to suck milk, which made his little face red, but he still did not give up. No one spoke, but several ministers could not help laughing. Perhaps he found that he was really powerless to do anything about the jade seal. Haoer looked up, his big eyes as clean as obsidian directly cast at his father, and his little mouth pursed. Nan 11's heart was instantly melted by cuteness, and she couldn't help but want to pick him up and kiss him hard. Rongyu raised his hand to pick up the jade seal, spread Hao'er's palm, and placed the jade seal in Hao'er's palm. The child was weak and naturally couldn't hold it. Rongyu held his son's small hand with his big hand, and the jade seal lay quietly in Hao'er's small palm. Hao'er looked at the crystal clear jade seal with big eyes. Everyone was silent, and surprise appeared on their faces. They felt that the little prince was really born to be an emperor. Look at this posture, he didn't care about eating or playing. The first one picked up the memorial, and the second one began to take a fancy to the jade seal. He should be responsible for the vast land of Dongling. Nan 11 was actually a little surprised. After all, Hao'er is only 1 year old. Apart from a few monosyllables, he can't even speak a few words. He probably doesn't know much about the concept of memorials and imperial seals. Many people think that the ceremony of drawing lots is just a formality, with some implications and a little expectation from parents. Even if Hao'er only played with the rattle today, no one would think that he would be useless in the future, or that he would not necessarily become a businessman in the future just because he was interested in abacus. But in fact, holding the imperial seal and memorials was undoubtedly a joy. Especially the ministers who were watching nearby, they were probably already singing praises to the 1-year-old prince. Rongyu put the imperial seal aside and said calmly, "Do you want anything else?" Hao'er turned his head to look at the toys on the table, his little mouth pursed, and he looked away without interest. He stood up and walked to Rongyu with his short legs, staggering in front of him, stretched out his little arms, and uttered short syllables, "Father, King, hold." Nan 11 was surprised. "Hao'er, you can actually call me father?" Rongyu's eyebrows softened, and he reached out to hold Hao'er up and let him sit in his arms. Alas, the princess was melancholy. "This little ungrateful guy, I take care of him day and night, coax him and hold him, but the first person he calls out is his father. The key is that his father is still so cold, with an iceberg-like temperament. All the civil and military officials in the court are scared, so why doesn't he know how to be afraid at all? Normal speaking, shouldn't he be closest to his mother? Maybe he and Rongyu are more compatible." Nan 11 smiled. "That's good. In the future, take father as your goal and be a wise and unparalleled emperor."